welcome everybody to today's In the File, where we'll be talking about Between Consistency and Complexity, the multipurpose app by RTL Plus. We'll be starting in just a second. A couple of household items before we actually do get started. The session is going to be recorded and it will be available on YouTube at youtube.com/Figma Design. If you do have any questions during this session, please make sure to use the Q&A function, the Q&A button. This way I can surface up your questions for the Q&A section at the end of this live stream. As I already said, set your chat to everyone instead of hosts and panelists so that everybody can see them. And last but not least, please be kind, everybody. We do have a code of conduct at figma.com/code-of-conduct. Also, for any future live streams, go to figma.com/events. And if you do have any suggestions or ideas or any feedback for us, send us an email at community@figma.com. All right, now let's get started. And first of all, a little introduction about myself. My name is Sebastian. I'm a designer advocate at Figma. I've been a designer advocate at Figma since the beginning of the year now. Before that, I was a product designer. And basically what I do here is help different stakeholders like designers, developers, product managers, work with design systems and work with Figma, help them figure out how to do that. I also do lots of community work and fun stuff like this live stream today. So I'm looking forward to today. And then we'll be heading right into our In the File for today. Our title is Between Consistency and Complexity, the multi-purpose app by RTL Plus. And for that, I'm very excited to welcome two guests today. We have Hanju Kim, who is a design system architect at RTL Plus, and we have Marvin Messenzehl, a senior product designer at RTL Plus. Welcome, the two of you.
Hey, great to be here. All right, perfect. So welcome everybody to this In the File session. It's so cool to be here as a daily user of Figma. It's so great to also be part of their community event. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity. And today, in the next 40 minutes or so, we want to talk a bit about this, let's say, daily battle we're fighting between consistency and complexity. And we also want to show you how we're building and how we're also working with Figma to build a multi-purpose app of RTL Plus. I think to get started, it would be good to explain this term of what is actually multi-purpose. So I think it's always a good idea to let our users speak. And we grabbed just one of our recent Google Play Store reviews. And there was one user who basically said something like, "It's crazy. I came here to watch my favorite series, but now I'm immersed in a whole universe of podcasts, music, and magazines about it." And that's basically what we're trying to do at RTL Plus. We are building a whole universe of entertainment with different media formats like TV shows, movies, podcasts, music, and so on. And maybe I already checked out in the chat, we have a lot of people from Germany here, which is great. And maybe we also have some people who are users of RTL Plus. So it would be super interesting to see what your favorite RTL Plus format is. It could also be trash TV. That's totally fine. Also, maybe a guilty pleasure also works. So my RTL Plus, or my favorite RTL Plus format is Kitchen Impossible. It's basically a cooking TV show, which is super, super funny and great. So basically, two chefs are battling each other. They're sending each other in other countries, and they have a cooking challenge there where they have to try a dish and they have to redo it in their original kitchen, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I always have a great time with friends when we're doing a Kitchen Impossible evening, but I'm not talking alone today. So Hanju, what is your favorite RTL Plus format?
Yeah, maybe only known about for the German, but that I'm gonna kind of soap genre is about GSST. Not sure it's about the exact German name, but it was so
Classic.
famous TV series, drama, soap genre. Yeah, I really
Good
like it.
old
And
classic.
then, yeah, and from there I learned from German speakers also there. So I really
So
like
cool.
it.
That's yeah. So you basically learn German with GZSZ.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
with our products.
You love to see it. Amazing, amazing. Okay, so as Sebastian already introduced ourselves, Today, myself, Marvin, and Hanju, we will be guiding you through this webinar and through some of our Figma files and design system stuff. But of course, we're not building this big product alone. We have a huge team of designers here. So we probably have a split in our team with UX designers, UI designers, but also media designers and some people who are specialized in UX writing, who are taking care of the copy and the product. And in every product, that is one important, or in every project, that is one important thing to keep in our minds is that we try to partner up one UX designer with one UI designer or product designer. So we always try to work in teams of two. That will become important later on. So to get a better idea of how big this RTL Plus world is actually right now, it's huge. So we have a lot of contents out there. And it's also a pretty, you can see it from the numbers, it is a complex and complicated product because we're combining these different types of media in a whole entertainment universe. We also have like different sections of the app. So you can think of it as one app for all the different types of media. We call these different media types purposes. So we have podcasts purpose, we have an audiobooks purposes and so on, but you can also think of them as separate sections within the app or different domains. And for the content, we have like currently, I think more than 620 movies and TV series. We also have RTL Plus original podcasts that are produced in-house with more of 200 of them on our platforms. And now we also have magazines with more than 200 articles coming each month. And all this app across all different platforms is currently used by 4 to 5 million active users per month, which is huge. So we have a big app. The next problem is, or not the next problem, but the next challenge is we also design for a lot of different platforms. So of course, we build and design for Android and iOS phones and also tablets, all modern web browsers. And nowadays, I think more than 5 TV platforms like Android TV, Magenta, tvOS, and so on. Because as a TV provider in Germany, our roots will always be on the TV. And that's why we're also, the TV will always be our foundation. But now we're getting more and more content in it. So right now we can see we have a lot of different contents, different types of contents where maybe users have one app per content. We have one app for music streaming. Maybe you have one app for audiobooks, one app for your magazines. And we try to combine that in one app. Next to that, we have a lot of different platforms. So as I've started almost now 1 year ago to work on this project, I was like, how in the world do you actually combine these different patterns of multiple apps and so many different media formats effectively in one app? That can't work. That's basically me 1 year ago. And it's a tough challenge. So to maybe bring some light into the dark and how we're making decisions, I thought of that myself in the beginning, that every design decision we're going to make, we have to make that on one line here. So either we have on the one hand, on the left-hand side, maybe consistency. Everything looks the same, everything behaves the same, with same interaction patterns, everything is like one app. And on the other hand, we have complexity, or let's call it maybe domain-specific complexity. So something that is super specialized for that specific purpose, for that specific domain. To maybe give you an example how complex that is, let's take the full screen player on music. So you're listening to your favorite song, you have that on your mobile phone, on the mobile app, you have the full screen player activated, you maybe want to shuffle, or you maybe want to repeat the song, you maybe want to manage your cue, or you want to sing with the lyrics or stuff like that. So this is like the full screen player. On podcasts, for example, there should also be a full screen player, but probably we need completely different controls. We don't need shuffle, we don't need repeating stuff, but maybe we need things like a sleep timer or maybe changing the playback speed or stuff like that. So the question now on this line is, where do we make that decision? Do we keep it consistent or should we make it a bit more complex? So right now we're working with this kind of workflow. So I wouldn't call it a design process. It's more like workflow because things can get quite chaotic at our place. But every project is guided by these two questions. What are we building and how do we actually build it? So remember, 2 questions, that's where the teams of 2 come into play. So on the left-hand side, we have this what are we actually building thing, with things like research, ideation, building information architectures, wireframes, a lot of lo-fi prototypes. So this is more like a UX design focus. And on the other hand, we have this how do we actually build that thing, where we're going to create high fidelity prototypes. We test a lot of things in usability tests with users. We learn from our outcomes and share them then in this circle. And all of this is driven by goals from our solution team we're working closely with. And of course, also product managers and other product owners. And then we will slowly come to that delivery stage. So maybe let's go back to that question one more time. How do we actually now combine these different patterns of multiple apps and so many different media formats in one app? So I think there is no universal answer to this, but a thing that maybe now comes also into place is our first design principle. And I think that also is like a little North Star vision that guides us. And we always say the content should come first. So alone from this little screenshot here from our content catalog, you can see that a lot of things are happening here. So we have different fonts, different typography, we have different colors, different shapes, different kinds of information, different media formats. So there's a lot of things are happening here already on the screen. So that's why we've decided to keep the design at a minimum, to really have a consistent and maybe concise design. It should be precise in communication, not too fancy. Currently, for example, we don't use any color in our product. So the content really comes first and should always be in the center. So the design should not disrupt this immersive experience for the user. So I know this workshop is called In the File, and we're getting into Figma files, I promise, to give a little teaser. I have a little screenshot here. So one big challenge we faced in the beginning and also like in the past year was also how we're actually organizing our Figma files, because with so many different sections and so many different platforms, you can get lost in organization and in your Figma files. So in the beginning, I think we tried, or we thought it would be a good idea to mimic our organizational structure in Figma. So right now we have teams, for example, a music team. And in that music team, we have Android developers working on the music Android app. We have iOS developers, we have web developers. And we thought of it like, hey, maybe it would be a good idea to maybe create a music folder. And then we create different Figma files for music Android and music web or music iOS. And in there, we have all the designs for the complete section of the app. So everything related to music. The problem is we had to copy and paste a lot of screens. We had to duplicate things. We had to make manual adjustments a lot of the time. And all of these designs, they were diverging as soon as we started to build them. So we already, like we did not even care about consistency right from the beginning. So currently we are in the final step of our transition phase, where we're making a new Figma structure here, where we still have a music folder, but now we're cutting our Figma files into different feature files. So for example, we have one file for music, which is about the full screen player or the playlist detail page. And in that case, we then have all the designs for all the platforms, especially only for that detail page. This will create a more consistent design. And that's a super important thing for us, because we found out that our users, they will use the app throughout the day, but on different devices. And that's why it's important to have kind of a consistent experience and keep the interaction patterns the same. So what we're going to do now is we're showing you through one of our features. We're taking a look at the podcast section and also the audiobook section. But to get everybody on the same page, we thought of it like, okay, it must be a simple example, something that everybody's understanding. So what is one thing every app needs? And no, we're not talking about buttons today. I'm sorry, we're talking about dialogues. So I'm jumping in the Figma file now, and I think we can show you around here. So we're now in a Figma file. Let's imagine this is a podcast feature file, and we're looking at the download feature on podcasts. So how users can download a podcast, basically. On the left-hand side, you can see the basic and typical structure of our Figma files. And that is for most of the parts like a real live Figma file. Of course, we don't have the things like the design system in here or the slides for the webinar, but we work with these sections. So we have a starting section, we have one UI design section, and then we also have a utility section where we from time to time include local components or prototypes. The first thing you can notice here is that for every Figma file, we have something called the Start Here page. And the Start Here page should be like a little introduction to the feature. So we have a section here where people can learn more about Figma, because this will be a file that will be shared with our developers. We're collaborating with our developers. And of course, we found out a lot of developers, they're not too familiar with Figma. They're not spending like their whole day in Figma, and they shouldn't, because they have to build the product. So we've collected all the information for them on a little Confluence page where we're documenting like general information about our product to get them a bit started with how we're actually using Figma, what are the different panels here, how can you measure distances, how can you export assets and stuff like that. This is all done in a central place. And I think that's also, a huge benefit that everybody gets up and running with Figma. We also include sometimes a link to a UX concept. You can think of the UX concept basically as like the little file where we try to answer the question what we're actually building. So in here, we got wireframes, we got information architecture, different states for the product, and so on. So like a general description, how the product should actually, or how the feature should actually be working. And then we're talking a bit about the feature. So this time it will be about the podcast downloads. For example, we talked a bit about the animation here. We're adding some links where people can find more information on that specific feature. So this page acts like a little documentation, let's call it like that. We also have one cool thing here in the utilities, for example, a little prototype. So the prototype will also be shared from time to time with developers so they can get a better picture how the product is actually behaving, what is happening here, and we can take a look at this prototype so you also know how the download feature works. We're here on a super simple podcast page. I can see all of the different episodes. So for example, I can just say, okay, I want to download this episode. Going to click the download button. We got a nice animation going on, short notification, episode is downloaded. I can also say, okay, I now want to delete this. We communicate also the successful deletion of that episode. We can go to the detail page here, and then we can basically do the same thing again, get a nice little animation, and this is basically the main download flow. I think the most exciting part is though, when we're jumping to how we're communicating these kind of features. So we get all the designs here. We're working now with the sections. We're marking them as ready for dev. So people can also use the dev mode. We're playing around with this. We're not 100% perfect, but we're getting there. And then we basically have one section for all the different states or parts for that feature. So for example, in that case, downloads can happen on the podcast detail page, but they can also happen on an episode detail page. And then the focus for later on will be dialogues and error messages. We basically got the same thing for tablets. And of course, also for web. For web, we don't provide a download feature. And for TV, come on, nobody's downloading podcasts on TV. But as you can see, we have two different breakpoints also on the tablet. So we have a tablet regular and a tablet large breakpoint for bigger and smaller tablets. And on mobile apps, because the app or the feature will look exactly the same, we're only providing one design for Android and iOS, because we tend to not work with the system or with the OS settings there. So we're basically working with a custom design, and that should be the same for every platform. As you can also see, I'm a huge fan of this little notes widget. I like that to give additional information. So for example, I can say to the developers here, you can see a list of the different download states, or we can also say, hey, this snack bar, you can find more on that in our design system documentation, which we are calling shared components. So I think it's a cool way to give some more additional context to the design. And you can also use these little widgets, but just checking out the widget button here, and then you search for notes. I already got that under my recents. So you can also view the details. It's a super cool plugin and a widget. So you can also check for like 5 different states. And I find it pretty helpful to communicate additional information. So one cool thing also we did with our designs, and I'm going to grab this to play around with it a bit, is we try to to also check like for the responsiveness of the design, if it's working for smaller mobile phones, but also for bigger phones. So we also nowadays, we're working with these min width and max width values, and all of that is managed by currently local variables in that file. So these are all the breakpoints we're working with. And what I can do now is, if I'm closing that, I can just drag the screen here. I can say, okay, is everything nicely and responsive? And does that look good? Or do we have any breaking changes in the design? That's great. And now we're also working with variables. So we just completed the transition to fully working with variables. So we also can just check out the light mode and how it would look like here. Hanju is talking you through all of the things we're working with variables now on, but just to give you a little teaser here. So we actually wanted to talk about dialogues and messages and stuff like that. And for example, I defined here some error messages, so things that can go wrong while downloading something. So for example, we have a generic error, or maybe you don't have disk, or you don't have capacity on your phone anymore, or maybe you're not even allowed to download that podcast because you're not a paid user of our app. So we have basically one dialog component here, and I can pull it here on the side. So we can customize that. We can, for example, show a link, or we can also show a secondary button. Or maybe I also can change the alignment on the button to keep it horizontal so that the component also works on a desktop device. So we got basically one flexible component, which is pretty great because we can use that across all of the different domains and purposes, and also across all of the different platforms. The problem is, from time to time, you want to introduce complexity to the designs. So we're currently 100% of this consistency side, but now we want to make it work a bit more complex because from time to time, we just need some domain-specific designs. So to show you that, we're jumping into a new file. So we're zooming out, zoop, and we jump into an audiobook file. So just imagine we're working on an audiobook feature here, and we're working on that flow where people can buy an audiobook. So we're working also with credits, just like Audible is doing it. And we now want to take a look at the flow where people redeem a credit to buy an audiobook. So for that case, we basically need a component like this. It's still a dialogue. It should have all these spacings and all the general anatomy of the dialogue component, a headline, 2 buttons. But now we got this weird link, a little bit of text, and also this like teaser of the audiobook that you're buying. We also want to include that in the dialogue. So what I did basically here is I've created a local component. So I've also marked that with the little underscore here to not publish it in a library, a local component for 2 different breakpoints where I just include these kind of information. And the cool thing is with that dialogue component from earlier, I can then use this local component as a slot. So with these slots, we can introduce complexity or domain-specific design decisions into our designs, which is pretty great. Still the same pattern, still the same component, but it is 100% adjusted to that specific use case here. So you can see that everything for this battle between consistency and complexity, we really need one important thing here and a solid foundation, and that will be our design system. And I think the best person to talk or to walk us through our design system is Hanju, because he's the master of all the components. So I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you, Marvin. Let's dive about the dialogue component, but I would like to introduce our couple of the methods to our design system. So like Marvin said, is the bridging the consistency and the complexity is our big challenge. Therefore, we brought some specific method about that. And the first thing is about that design token first. A design token is kind of agnostic, it's core part of our design system. And all the visual identity is a way of the abstracting. Therefore, all the styles has a unique name and is delivered as a token. So for the style from the Figma, directly distributed to the designers, and generate the token from the style is going to be distributed as the entire the developer. Therefore, we are using the same languages between the designer and developer. So, and therefore, we are using the same languages. Therefore, in the between the developer and the designer, and we're saving the communication cost, and we decrease the human errors by the design handle for that one. So as you can see the diagram, so all the styles are in the Figma distributed by the file, the published file. So that designer, domain designer, will propose design using the directly from the style. And the other hand, all the styles are converted and exported as a JSON file, and the JSON file is transform each individual platform like a web and Android, iOS for the platform specific for that one. This is more the details about the token pipeline about that one. So the design system team is a manager and define that as a single source truth of the Figma design style. So when the design team is updated or the manager, the design style, that's a token. And when we are updated, and then we export it as a generated token file, and then we update the design token level. And automatically transform we are using the Amazon style dictionary transform. So they are changed each platform specific token file, the CSS and Swift and XML file, that one. And after that is automatically updated each platform design system design repository, and then product developer can use the same names about that one. The token type is not only we are delivering only the style file. For example, in the Figma color and typographic grid, we already delivered the style token and then plus we also create the custom token like a sizing and the breakpoint value. Also, we can directly integrate it as token. Plus, also all the kind of vector graphic images we are not delivering directly from the design handoff in there, but every image file and the icon file is delivering by the design token. So advantage is here, it's super simple maintaining with updating from the design, because when we are updating the icons and then developer, we don't need to every communication with the developer to the designer, hey, please update it, please update this icon. But just updating the icon in the design repository, and then automatically build it up in the product, and then automatically apply that entire thing. And also kind of logo, also we have so many domains, so many purpose in the same logo. If we want to change the logo updating, and then so many happen as communication calls, but we are using the design token pipeline, and we update the ones, and then it applied entire platform, so we can easily align that. And yeah, like Marvin already said that we already converted from the style color to the variable value, and therefore the variable value is already using our product design for that, but we are doing the paging, so converting our style token to the variable token for that one. So this week we are testing as a JSON file, exported file, and then we are converting to each platform the variable value. Yes, it looks really nice. It looks awesome for that one. So we are looking forward about the next another values to delivering the bio design token for that one. And next point is about the components. The token is quite easily integrated, because the visual identity does not affect so much about cross the platform, cross the purpose about that one, because visual atomic value about that one. But the component case is quite complexity, because like I said, Marvin said, there are some specific case we need to cover that. We are not detaching from the base component, but we have to cover also the component, the domain or purpose specific component for that one. Therefore, we divided two components there, and then one is base component, and the one is purpose component. This is domain component. And the base component is surely managed by the design system team, and this is going to be reshare that and then reuse that for entire cross the platform, cross the purpose about that one. And other than that, the proposed component is more platform specific or the domain specific kind of that one. So far it was good, but like I said, we happened something. We need to submit between of there. Therefore, I would like to share some demo. So as you can see that this is our previous dialog component. We have a 7 variant. We don't know how many variants is there. So each purpose creates the component and the register as a main component. And then, oh, we have already dialog, but I cannot use it. Should I have to detach it, or should I have to recreate it? yeah, added another variant and then use that one. But this is kind of okay. Each designer has load the dialogues and then, okay, find the magazine with our link, okay, but this is not really reusable component for that one because it's not detaching. We need to updating some action style, button style, or headline style. We have to update it every 7 variant, 8 variant for that one. Therefore, we brought that some kind of some snip container or slot container. So it's like a more like approach, like a developer template approach about that one. So in the code block, there is a small part is going to be always as overriding by the other developer, that one. So same aspect like this way. So we create a dialog component is in here as a main component, and then we show that some here you can see you can swap the component if you want or as you wish any components about that one. So for example, let's say, okay, I'm just need a normal dialog, and then we can turn off that, and then you can see this is title, and we can use that. Everything is about that one. So button, the link, another link, and like that, like Marvin said. But in this case, also we can show it here if the same component, and then we can turn on the snippet, and then we can see the swapping internally. It's coming here. I think it's here, right? So local component, this is created. So it's here. You can see this component is completely 100% connecting with our main component, and then you can see also the different design and very flexible about that one. For example, so if you update it, so local component it works, or okay, and the global Y, oh, we need to update it our headline title style, and then going to be all, and then this works also. Okay. Like this way is not detaching the design system component, but also it can be covered for every specific situation usage is about them. So like I said, this is also, we can swap it in the here and then change it. And same way. So here, oh, let's do one more thingy is about that. Yes, like this one. So like this way is also our full player screen is also can be the adaptable to that one, because this is controller is the different based on use case which propose it contains for that, but basically the other thing is metadata or image, we can reuse that one. People can say this, yeah, just design wise, just swapping the icon is totally fine. But yeah, that's true. But the thing is, with all the components should be tried to, I mean, our design system component is try to be same structure with the real code implementation for that one. Therefore, code block, code structure is like that way, and therefore in the design system component also structure is going to be the same. That means not only makes happy for the developer, but also designers give you the insight how going to be implemented and the component side, and then between the communication they easily understand, oh, this is what we are expanding the size, and then this is going to be putting in here or stick to there, some kind of that one. Therefore, aligning or trying to make, of course, it cannot be 100%, but the thing is trying to make similar structure or same structure with the design component and the code components together, that one. And next thing is about the documentation. The documentation is kind of scary skills about that is from the designer. So it's so annoying, have to writing everything for that one. But the documentation is huge advantageous when, huge advantageous between the design work process, because if only one designer will say, okay, I can do everything, I can do whatever. So there is no need to, I know everything about component, that one. But basically we are global people in there, and then each people just chatting 1 minute, and then 10 designers 10 minutes, and 100 designers 100 minutes. But that one, that was a waste of time about that one. Therefore, the documentation is way advantaging to better wasting or communication times about that. Therefore, we have a 2 documentation thing is basically all the design system component has a component spec documentation. So this is purely for the designers. As you can see that all the property component property and then swap feature and then inset or subset component is introduced, and how do you use it, how to use it. And also you can see the example, hey, this case, this is like this is like this. And at the same time, every component has, you can see people, product designers see instantly when the asset panel define the component and the mouse over, and you can see some component documentation. Oh, this button is aimed for web platform and size. We have 2 different size, and then type of 3 different types, kind of them. Those 3 things is a token and the component, the base component and the composed component, and with the documentation. Those 3 methods make a cohesive work process between the product design and the design system team, and that makes we thinking is about that this bridging is quite successful between the consistency and complexity about that one. Cool. That thing, I'd like to hand over to the Marvin again.
Perfect. That's my part again. So I'm wrapping things up here. I think you can leave the screen share, Hanju, and just giving you a little nudge when you can go to the next slide. So in the end, maybe to show something that was really a big influence for us, a very famous German designer, Dieter Rams, who is basically famous for also one of these quotes, as less but better. And that's basically also this guiding principle we're trying to work with. You can see Hanju showed how many different component variants we had before we made this change to a slot component. And that was a nightmare to maintain. It was so complex to fiddle around with it, to make everything work. When we had to make changes, we had to publish the component all over again. So we try to work now with less things, but making them a bit better. And maybe you can also refer to as better to give us more flexibility, to introduce complexity, to maybe also introduce something domain specific or something like that. So jump over to the next slide, please. So maybe you remember this little line here where we had to make a decision. It's either consistency or complexity. I think nowadays, next slide. Yeah, nowadays, we're more in a place like where we have this little overlap between consistency and complexity. We're still working on it. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect circle. Maybe in the future it will get bigger. Maybe it will get smaller. We don't know. I think it also depends on the feature. But we're getting there. And I think nowadays with tools like Figma and other stuff, we have some pretty good tooling also to make our workflow efficient, to keep our work to a minimum so we can really concentrate on building the best experience for the user as possible. So I think in the end, you can jump to the final slide. We can say thank you. So thank you for being here. Thank you also for organizing this, Sebastian. It was such a great session, so much fun also to prepare it. And if you have any questions, if you want to dive deeper into the works we're doing at RTL Plus, if you have any questions about this crazy cool pipeline Hanju has built, which is like, it's mind-blowing, you can always get in touch on socials, on Instagram, or just reach out. And yeah, I think we can jump into some questions. I've already peeked into them and there are some really great questions. So I'm handing it over to you, Sebastian.
Yes, thank you so much for this great deep dive. I think the chat was really, really excited to see all of the details that both of you showed off. We do have a couple of questions lined up already, and you've also been busy, I know, on answering some of them already in the chat itself. So let's dive in. I think one of the first questions that came up was regarding your ways of annotating things. We saw in the file, basically, when you showed your in the file structure, that you had these annotations on some of the screens, and there were some questions about how do you do that? Do you use a plugin? Did you actively decide against using just comments, basically? And how do developers see these annotations if they need to? So, yep.
Yeah, so I can take over this one. So we're working with this widget plugin, and I think it's great because you have your annotations, or I would not call them annotations. I would refer to them as additional context for the design, because sometimes you have the case that you can't communicate everything in one frame. So maybe you need a little bit of additional information. So that's why we're using this notes widget. And the cool thing with this notes widget is everything is visible on the frame. So if a developer jumps into the file and checks it out, he will also see this widget and also see the little note. And so he can maybe ask a question or something like that. There's also a cool thing where you can place a comment on the widget and it will stick to that widget when you move it around. So that is also pretty cool. And we mostly use comments inside the team to give each other feedback or to ask questions, but we don't want to hide additional context to understand the design inside a comment. So things like these, they should be visible, and that's why we're using the widgets. We have to be careful how much we're documenting with the widget, so you can't like document like 4 or 5 pages full of widgets or notes. But yeah, I think for just adding some additional information, it's totally fine.
All right, thank you so much. The next question that we have here is from Hugo, and Hugo is asking, do the RTL Plus apps support multi-language? So other than multi-platform, multi-purpose, do you also support multi-language? And if so, how is the team basically thinking about this at the in the design phase?
Hanju, are we already working on Korean support?
Yeah, that's correct. But basically, we are at the moment focused on the German, the languages. But we are slowly, and our big roadmap is going to be spread its entire European continental. And after that, we will see for the future about that. But at the moment, we are focusing on the German languages.
All right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And then when you were showing off all these components, lot components, and all the intelligence and smartness around that, we had a couple, we had a question coming up here. Sometimes designers need specific components that are not yet in the central system. So how do you handle these exceptions? Do you have a contribution process? And thank you.
Yeah, we basically have something like that. And I think we had a case, I think a few weeks ago, where I worked on the sleep timer on podcast to make an updated version there. And we didn't have a component that is like the bottom sheet, but you had controls in it and stuff like that. So I started to create that by myself because I was the first person who needs this. First of all, I asked Hanju, do we have a component which can do something like that? And then he was like, no, we have to create it. I've created that component and I let it inside my file for the podcast purpose, just for that specific feature. And then after we had the feature in development and another person was asking for a similar component, Hanju approached me then because he has like his crazy Kanban board with all the components and what's their status, super organized. And then we were like, okay, now another purpose wants to use this component. Now it's time to shift that to our central component library so other persons can also use it. So that's basically our approach. So Hanju is basically like the observer of all the components, but it also involves a lot of communication because every component we're working on, we have to communicate this. So, hey, I have this use case. I will be creating a component for this.
Great.
Maybe I can add something else about that. That we call that is the component is promote process about that one. So basically, we define that when the product designer need a new component or specific component, and then just asking, oh, we have it design system component which we can do available for now. And then second question is it the one time needed or is it going to be more happen for the future? And then based on the decision, we have some discussing with the product designer, the design system team. And then after that, we audit the component and consult the component to promote it as a base component or stay there for now, but we will do later for the base component. That kind of process we have it and the management of the component system.
And is that process similar for updating existing components and like adding different kinds of properties for potentially, because we all already also had questions around that topic as well.
Okay. Yeah, both two cases are open. It's just the thing is to defining and the contextually this component is the evaluate is for the base component about that, and then either adding or either updating, and then based on that, all the component should be the trackable for the base component. Therefore, because base component is going to be surely thinking with the code components about that one. So therefore, a little bit take some time to specific component to the base component, but that's going to be easily used for the implement size.
I see. And is there like, I have this question here as well that is asking around how do you handle custom elements that aren't built as components, basically? So anything that is probably needed in individual product aspects that aren't basically like, are there guidelines, I guess, around that? Are there, how do you make sure that these elements still stay consistent even if they're not part of the design system or coming from the component library?
Marvin, or I can
Yeah,
say
I can go for
something
it because
yes.
I think as a product designer on a purpose, I can answer this one. So it's difficult. I think currently when we're designing new things, we always try to design that from existing things we have, to not invent every time the wheel 100% new. So in the end, it's coming down to communication. I think I'm a strong believer that if we have everything as a component, it definitely makes sense. And there shouldn't be elements like floating around that are not like 100% in our design guidelines, because we have a custom design for every platform. We need to have one unified design language. So we rarely have custom elements. I think we had one as we launched the NFL for the regular season. We had like one element there that was like only a promotional teaser. And then we got rid of it because people not clicked it and stuff like that. So that was not a component at this time, and we only used it on one page. But this is like an exception probably.
All right. Then Stefan asks, do you have some kind of versioning, either per component for the whole design system or for the documentation? If not, how do developers know about updates?
Yeah. Do you want to go with the component updating and versioning process, Hanju?
Yeah, basically, it's just quite tricky part about that one, because the design system part is samely started when we are building the product. So therefore, so many changes, the version changing is component, and at the same time, the code component is also the changing. But first of all, we are now syncing the versioning with that one. So basically, we are versioning control with the Figma as the Figma that the base component is version history. We use it, and we are adding some breaking changes. We are using the branches of that one. So therefore, with the mark that adding some new component or updating the new component, we are using the branch Figma that one. At the same time, there's the design system that you are just GitLab repo, and that's going the same versioning with that components. Each component has a documentation at the GitLab repo, and then there is a version is matching with our component system and the GitLab repository component. So basically, the design team, Figma, we are using the version history and the branch.
I see. Perfect.
Yeah. Also for the design files, when we're making like bigger changes to designs or features, we also now work with the updated version history, and we make little commits every time we're working on a file. Because the cool thing is also when you're checking out the version history and you right click on one of the previous versions, you can share the link to exactly that version, which also might be helpful from time to time if you want to see it side by side, how things are comparing and how we're documenting or communicating these things with developers. There's also one note category where you can specifically annotate updates or changes. But in the end, actually, every time we're handing off a feature or a change to a developer, they already know that there will be a design update. So we involve them very early in the planning cycle, also from a product perspective. And then we'll basically make a handoff session with like all the different platforms. So one developer from every platform, and then we're walking them through the design. And so they also know what has changed and what they need to be doing.
Awesome. Super interesting. Especially with a versioning and everything. Good hint from you, Marvin. You would be a great designer advocate, I think.
Hey, who knows?
All right, we have another question here regarding your component and I guess just a complete design system library. Was the library built from scratch, or was it adopting an existing system? In either case, what were some of the most critical considerations during the initial stages of building the component library? Where does one start building a component library from?
I couldn't say the answer is a yes or no, but the one rule is that one we decided when we are basically we created from the scratch everything, because we are at the beginning, our product is going to be our universal design approach. Therefore, we have a unique interaction, unique design pattern, unique component pattern of that one. But the other hand, the second point is important thing is about that compare with the usability or the consistency in there. So we decided usability, user usability is more higher priority of that one. Therefore, in case needed platform specific case, we will follow that higher mega prioritization of that one. So some of that, for example, some base element like a radio button, some kind of switch is kind of, we are using native one. But other than that, we are try to using our design languages. But then like a bottom sheet or the other component is going to be our own unique component approach. That one. So the answer is going to be created from the scratch, but some part is really adapted. And then because anyway, the implementation wise, they have advantage, just use it. Like for example, Switch also they just reuse it, and from the Google Android platform, just from the material switches, good, just directly use it. Therefore, in that case, we are allowed to that from the.
But also,
migrate.
I think before, there was an RTL Plus product before. So we had the single purpose app on the market for only video streaming and TV series. So we basically relied on that kind of design language, made some updates, but we've built the complete design system and component library from scratch. But that was basically our guiding principle there, the existing single purpose app.
Awesome. I wanted to ask, from my perspective, one question regarding variables, because for me that's super interesting with teams, implementing variables right now. How did you go about this? How did you start this process? You said that you are basically switched over to color variables by now, which is super great to hear. How did you start that process, and how has it changed your workflow since?
I can answer this for that one, because yes, at the moment we have both. So when we are product designer using the color and create the component, they can choose the style or the variable. But luckily the variable, when we are creating the variable, just dump that from our style to the convert to our variable, and then see that both in the top part, the square as a variable, and the bottom part, the styles. Mm-hmm. Some designers doesn't know where it. They are already using the variable. They are creating the component, and they're super nice because always the priority. And then anyway, we have a color code, color scheme names are the semantic names about that one. For example, UI color and on UI highlight color, just type it and then comes up always the variable first. So the converting from the product designer side is from style to the variable is very smooth for that one. The point is, the second part for me is how to deliver the design tokenize or the variable thingy about that one. We already have a look about the last API from the Figma thing, how we can get directly from variable value to here. But and we are and keep going about that. But anyway, I can say it is way better because when we are using the style, and the style has a two value, because of light and dark color, and also we are using the wireframe color for the UX designer. Actually, only one color exists, three different styles. But the variable can contain that. There's one name, and then you interactively change it by the use case. Therefore, it's a huge impact for the design process about that. And also really looking for that, how can it deliver this very smooth? We tested and it works. So soon as this color is going to be converted from, we're gonna kill the style and then we're gonna use in the variable. But at the moment we are so far in the middle of there, and really looking for that another value. We see some of the different the type of the variable in there, and we are really looking for the possibility to delivering the tokenizes about the variable for that. Yeah.
Awesome. I think from my perspective, I mean, that's super interesting. Also, the plugin that you built, customized basically to get that all synced between development and design is definitely. If you ever want to share more about that, I would be happy to host a separate live stream, honestly. But in the interest of time, I do have one more question for the two of you. But before I have that question, I wanted to launch a quick poll onto all of your screens. So something should be popping up in a second now. I hope everybody can see that. It's just a one question thing. And then we can move on with our very last question for today. And that's just me asking the two of you, what will you be watching or listening to or reading next on your platform? That's what would interest me.
Hanju, go for it.
Oh, it's so difficult for that one. You know what? I'm kind of the fan of the podcast, fan of that one. So I saw that in the slide. I see the metal you already mentioned. Guest chat, there's podcast also available. I didn't knew it, so I'm gonna listen to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of cool podcasts now, but probably the thing that I will be using the most the next few weeks will be our new feature in music. We're currently working on something that is called Flow. So based on a mood or based on an activity, we will be generating an AI playlist with different contents in music. And I'm super excited to try that out. We worked really hard on that also together with our engineers. We currently can use it in our beta version now, so probably I probably will be flowing the next few weeks.
I love that. I love when you work for a place basically where you're very passionate for the product and get to test out the beta features before everybody else.
That's so great.
It's true.
That is
It's true.
amazing. All right. We're at the end of our time. I would like to again thank the two of you so much for this deep dive, for answering all of these questions, for taking the time. Thank you, RTL, for letting us do this. People know where to find you. People know where to find me. Thanks everybody for being here. Yeah, have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Bye.